The wind howled like a wounded animal outside the wooden cabin. Snow slammed against the windows, thick and merciless, turning the world into a frozen prison. Inside, a single man sat near a weak fire, rubbing his hands together. His name did not matter much anymore. Out here, far from cities, far from voices, he was just the lonely human. The fire crackled, but the heat was thin. He had been alone for weeks, and loneliness pressed on his chest heavier than the cold. The night stretched long, and he knew that without fire, without food, without company, the darkness could drive a man insane. He listened to the storm. Every gust of wind made the walls groan as if the cabin itself wanted to give up. He thought of the past. Friends long gone, voices he no longer heard, laughter that once warmed him more than any fire. But now only silence. Only the sound of his own breathing, then suddenly a sound broke through the storm. Knock. The man froze. Knock. Knock, it was faint but real. The sound of knuckles or claws tapping on the wooden door. He stared at the door with wide eyes. No one should be here. The storm was deadly. No traveler could have survived outside. Unless it was not human. His heart began to pound. Slowly he rose to his feet, the old floor creaking under his boots. He reached for the rusty tool lying near the fireplace, half a shovel, half a weapon, and stepped closer to the door. The knock came again, weaker this time, almost like a plea. He swallowed. His voice cracked when he spoke. Who's there? No answer. Only the storm screaming. He tightened his grip on the shovel. Against reason, against fear, he pulled the door open. A figure collapsed into the doorway. Snow swirled in around her as she fell forward, her body trembling. She was not human. He could see that at once. Her skin was pale silver, almost glowing in the firelight. Her hair was long, tangled, and shimmered with strange colors as the light touched it. Her clothes were torn, barely holding against the cold. She lifted her face weakly. Her lips trembled, and her voice broke through the wind like a fragile thread. Please, share your bed, or I will freeze tonight. The man's breath caught in his throat. An alien. In his cabin. On a snowy night when the world already felt like the edge of survival. He stepped back instinctively, raising the shovel. Fear battled with shock. But her eyes were not those of an enemy. They were wide, desperate, and filled with the raw instinct to survive. Get inside, he muttered finally. She crawled forward, collapsing near the fire, shivering so violently that the old rug beneath her shook. Snow melted from her clothes, dripping onto the wooden floor. She pressed her hands close to the flames, but her lips still trembled. He stared at her, unsure if he had just saved himself from loneliness, or invited death into his home. Who are you? He asked in a harsh whisper. She did not answer immediately. Her head dropped forward, weak with exhaustion. Then, with a breath that sounded almost like a sob, she repeated the same words, softer now. Share your bed, or I will freeze. The man's stomach twisted. He knew the truth. The fire was too small, the night too cold. Even with the flames, she might not last until morning. The only true warmth was the human body itself. He took a step closer. She looked fragile, almost broken. Yet there was something powerful hidden under her weakness, like a storm waiting to rise again. But was she really helpless? Or was this a trick? He remembered stories. Not all aliens were kind. Some killed without warning, some used pity as a weapon. His hand tightened on the shovel, but his chest tightened too, with something he had not felt in a long time. Compassion. The fire popped. Shadows danced across the cabin walls. He stared at her and she stared back, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The storm outside grew louder, as if the whole world wanted to crush this fragile moment. At last, he lowered the shovel. You can stay, he said slowly. But if you try anything, she nodded weakly. Her lips curved into a faint, broken smile. I only want to live. One more night. He pulled another blanket from the shelf and tossed it toward her, but she shook her head. Her voice cracked again, urgent and trembling. Bed, please. The man felt a chill deeper than the snow outside. In that moment, the lonely human realized this night was no longer his own. The storm howled, the fire flickered, and in his cabin now sat a stranger, an alien woman whose plea had already bound their fates together. Outside, the snow buried the earth in silence. Inside, a new story had just begun. The cabin had never felt so small. The man sat on the edge of his wooden chair, watching the strange woman by the fire. Her silver skin glowed faintly as the flames danced, making her look almost unreal. Steam rose from her torn clothes as snow melted away, leaving dark wet patches on the floor. He told himself not to trust her. She was alien, not human. She could be dangerous. She could be lying. But the way her body shook, the way her teeth chattered, made her look more like a broken bird than a threat. Still, his shovel rested close to his hand. The fire cracked loudly. The storm outside roared against the windows, reminding him that without shelter, no one would survive the night. The alien woman curled her knees up, trying to trap the little warmth she could find. Her lips trembled, and finally she spoke again. "You saved me." Her voice was fragile, heavy with exhaustion. "But I must stay. If I go back outside, I die." The man's jaw tightened. He wanted to shout at her, to demand answers. Instead, his words came out sharp but quiet. "Who are you?"
"Why are you here?"
For a long time, she said nothing. Her eyes reflected the firelight, strange and otherworldly. Then she whispered, "It does not matter who I am. It matters who hunts me." The man's stomach dropped. "Hunts you?" he repeated. She nodded slowly. "If they find me, you will be dead too." Silence spread between them. The storm rattled the wooden walls as though the wind itself wanted to push inside. He felt the cold crawling deeper even though the fire was alive. He leaned forward, gripping his knees. "Listen, this is my cabin. My fire, my life. If I keep you here, I need the truth. Otherwise, you leave. Freeze or not." Her gaze locked onto him. Something sharp, something powerful flickered behind her silver eyes, but only for a second. Then it softened again into weakness. "My name," she hesitated. "Is Lyra," he frowned. "Lyra?" "Yes," her voice cracked. "I ran. I should not be here. But I had no choice. My body gave up. Your fire, your bed. It is the only reason I can live another night." The man rubbed his temple. He was not used to voices. For weeks he had only heard wind and fire. Now suddenly an alien sat in his home speaking like she belonged here, and yet part of him wanted to believe her. Her shoulders shook again. She pulled the blanket tighter, but her body was still trembling violently. Finally she whispered, "Please, let me share your warmth. Only for tonight. Tomorrow, if I live, I will leave." He stared at her. He thought of her words. Share your bed. The idea made his stomach knot. She was alien, a stranger, someone he should not even trust with his fire. But the truth was clear. Without real warmth, she might not last until dawn. He tried to ignore the feeling of pity crawling into his chest. He tried to hold on to his anger, his fear, his suspicion. But when her weak voice broke again, "Please," he felt something shift inside him. The lonely human side, heavy and tired. "Fine, but only for tonight." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, though her eyes remained sad. "You will not regret it." He wasn't sure if that was comfort or a warning. The fire dimmed as the wood burned lower. He added more logs, the sparks leaping like tiny stars. Shadows flickered on the walls, and in those shadows, Lyra's alien form looked both fragile and dangerous at once. She pulled the blanket tighter, but her eyes never left him. He wondered what she was hiding. Then, outside the cabin, something moved, a crunch, a step in the snow. The man froze, every muscle tightening. His head turned slowly toward the window. The storm blurred everything, but for one brief moment he swore he saw a shadow passing by, tall, armored, scanning the darkness. His heart pounded. He looked back at Lyra. Her eyes were wide, her body tense. She whispered one word, almost too soft to hear. "They found me." The man's blood turned cold. The cabin was no longer quiet. Even with the fire glowing, even with the walls closed tight, fear had entered and sat with them like an invisible guest. The man's eyes stayed locked on the window. Outside, the storm screamed, but under that wild noise he had heard it. Steps. Heavy, slow, deliberate. Not the sound of a lost traveler. No, it was the sound of someone searching. When he turned back, he saw Lyra. She was curled under the blanket, shivering, her silver eyes wide with panic. She was not just cold now, she was afraid. "They are close," she whispered. "They will not stop until they find me." The man's throat went dry. He gripped the shovel tighter, though deep down he knew a rusty piece of metal was useless against whatever hunted her. "Who are they?" he demanded. Lyra's lips trembled. For a moment she stayed silent, as if weighing whether to speak. Then her voice came low, like a secret torn from her chest. "Soldiers, not mine, not yours. A band of hunters sent to bring me back." "Bring you back?" His brows knotted. "Why?" She lowered her eyes. Because I ran, the fire popped loudly. Sparks jumped, and both of them flinched as if it were an attack. The man took a step back, rubbing his face. He wanted to shout, to demand more answers, but his breath came fast and shaky. He had not asked for this. He had not asked for soldiers outside his door, nor an alien fugitive under his roof. And yet, here she was. Lyra shivered harder, pulling the blanket close. Her teeth chattered. "It's too cold," she whispered. "Even the fire is not enough, please." She looked up, her eyes filled with desperation. "Share your bed." The words hit him like a blade. He stared at her, silent, the storm outside rattling the wooden walls. Her plea was not strange now. It was terrifying. If she died in his cabin, frozen and pale, he would have her death on his hands. But if he let her close, if she touched him, what then? She wasn't human. Her skin glowed faintly. Her body carried a strange energy. What if she harmed him while he slept? What if this was all a trick? The man's chest tightened with doubt, but her voice came again, softer, breaking apart like fragile glass. "I will not live the night alone." He stood there, torn between fear and something deeper. Something human. Loneliness had gnawed at him for weeks. Now for the first time, someone else's life hung in his hands. Slowly, he dropped the shovel against the wall. He moved to the bed, pulling back the rough blanket. His voice was hard, but his hands shook. "Fine, but stay on your side." Lyra's lips curved faintly, though her eyes were still full of shadows. "I will not harm you. I only need warmth." She slid onto the bed, trembling violently. The wood creaked under the weight of two bodies. She was ice against his side at first, her skin cold enough to make him flinch. But slowly her breathing grew steadier, her shaking less fierce. The man lay stiff as stone, staring at the ceiling. Every second stretched long. Every gust of wind outside sounded like footsteps. Every shadow felt alive. Minutes passed. Then in the quiet, her voice broke the air again. "I should not be here. If they find me, you will die too." His eyes snapped toward her. "Then why bring them here?" Her gaze met his, glowing faintly in the dim firelight. "Because you are human, and I had nowhere else to go." Before he could speak again, a sound outside froze them both, a thud. Then another. Heavy boots in the snow, his heart raced. He reached for the shovel, clutching it like a lifeline. Lyra pressed closer, whispering through trembling lips, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." The steps stopped right outside the cabin. Silence crushed the air. The man held his breath. The fire popped once more, and even that tiny crack felt like thunder. Then came a scrape along the wall, like metal against wood. A shadow passed across the window. A muffled voice in a language he did not understand. The man's pulse hammered in his ears. Sweat chilled his skin despite the fire. The soldiers were here. Beside him, Lyra closed her eyes, her breath hot against his arm. She whispered only two words, "They know." The night had turned into a cage. The cabin walls no longer felt safe. They felt thin, weak, like paper between them and death. The storm screamed, the fire hissed, and outside the hunters waited. The man's breath came in short bursts. He sat upright on the bed, shovel in hand, though he knew it was nothing against armored soldiers. Beside him, Lyra trembled, her glowing eyes shut tight as if she could vanish by will alone. The scrape against the wall came again, metal dragging slowly along wood. It was a cruel sound, like a predator testing the strength of its prey's cage. Then silence, only the storm. The man leaned closer to Lyra, whispering, "How many?" Her lips trembled before she spoke. "At least 3. Maybe more. They travel in squads. They will circle the cabin. They will not leave until they are sure." He clenched his jaw. He wanted to curse, to shout, to demand why fate had shoved this burden on him, but the words stayed inside. Instead, he forced himself to ask the one question that mattered. "What do they want from you?" Her eyes opened, silver and dim like dying stars. "I carry something they fear. Something they must keep hidden. That is why they hunt me. That is why you must not let them in." The man stared at her. He wanted to ask more, but footsteps crushed the snow again, closer this time. Shadows flickered across the window, tall and armored. He saw a faint beam of red light sweep through the storm, scanning, searching. Lyra grabbed his wrist suddenly, her fingers cold and desperate. "Do not move. Do not speak. If they sense you, they will burn this cabin to ash," his heart thundered. He had never felt so helpless. He was just a man with a lonely fire in the middle of nowhere. Now he sat between an alien fugitive and soldiers who carried weapons that could turn him into dust. The footsteps moved again, circling. For a moment, one shadow stopped at the door. The handle rattled. The man's grip on the shovel tightened until his knuckles turned white. "Stay," Lyra whispered. "Please." The handle rattled again, harder this time, then it stopped. A voice spoke outside, strange, guttural, carried by the storm. Another answered, deeper, angrier. The man couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Orders, commands. The soldiers moved away from the door. For now. The man let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. His whole body trembled, sweat dripping down his temple despite the cold. Lyra slumped back against the wall, her voice almost broken. "They will not stop. They know I am near. They smell it, they feel it. Tomorrow when the storm clears, they will search every inch of snow until they find me." The man turned to her, his voice sharp. "And what about me? If they find you here, they'll kill me too." Her eyes softened. Yes, the blunt truth made his stomach twist. He looked at the fire, the tiny, fragile flame fighting the storm, and for the first time he wished he had stayed alone. Loneliness was heavy, yes, but death was heavier. Lyra leaned closer, her voice trembling but fierce. "But if you help me, if you hide me until morning, I promise, your life will not be wasted." Her words struck deep. He wanted to call her a liar, wanted to push her out into the snow and save himself, but her eyes burned with something more than desperation. There was weight in them, something that felt like truth. The storm howled, shaking the cabin. Snow rattled against the windows. In the distance, a strange hum cut through the night. Machines, weapons, alien tech. The hunters were not leaving. The man closed his eyes for a moment. He had to decide. He could throw her out and hope they spared him, or he could stand by her and risk everything. The silence between them grew thick. Finally, he whispered, "If I hide you, and they break in anyway, what then?" Lyra's eyes glimmered with something sharp, something dangerous. "Then we fight, together." The man stared at her. A lonely farmer holding a rusty shovel, beside a shivering alien who carried secrets too big for him to imagine. And outside, the hunters in the snow waited for the right moment to strike. The night was far from over. The fire had burned low, its glow stretching shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the storm screamed louder than ever, but inside, the silence between them felt heavier than the snow piling against the door. The man sat stiff in his chair, shovel across his knees, eyes fixed on Lyra. She sat on the bed, wrapped in his blanket, her silver skin faintly shining in the firelight. Her breath was shaky, her body weak, but her eyes, those glowing eyes, never left him. He broke the silence first. "Tell me the truth now. Why are they hunting you?" Lyra lowered her head, her long, tangled hair falling forward. For a moment she seemed to struggle, as if speaking the truth would tear something inside her. Then she looked up, her voice soft but sharp enough to pierce the room. "Because I stole something, and because I know something I should not." The man's grip tightened on the shovel. "Stole what? From who?" Her lips trembled. She hesitated, then whispered, "From my own people, from the ones who call themselves rulers." He frowned. "You mean, you're a criminal?" Her gaze hardened. "Not a criminal, a rebel, a survivor." The storm crashed against the windows, but her voice cut through like lightning. She leaned forward, eyes burning. "My world is ruled by those soldiers outside. They crush villages, burn homes, and silence voices. They call it order. They call it peace. But it is chains, and I broke those chains." The man's chest tightened. He had lived in loneliness, but he knew the taste of oppression. He had seen it in wars, in stories, in history books. Her words carried truth. Still, he pressed. "And what did you steal?" Lyra's hand slid slowly to her side beneath the torn cloth of her clothes. When she pulled it back, she held something small, something that glowed faintly in her palm. It was a crystal, no bigger than a stone, but it pulsed with strange light. Alive, almost breathing. The man leaned forward, eyes wide. "What is that?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Hope." The glow reflected in her eyes as she spoke. "This crystal holds knowledge. Secrets of war, locations of prisons, names of the innocent who disappeared, proof that the rulers are not gods but monsters. If I bring it to the right hands, the galaxy will know the truth. Their empire will crack." The man stared at the crystal, the light dancing across his face. It was beautiful, dangerous, alive. "And that's why they're here," he muttered. "They'll kill anyone to get it back." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, and they know I carry it. That is why I cannot stop running." Silence again. Only the storm. Only the fire. Only the pounding of his own heart. The man rubbed his temple. He had asked for answers, but now that he had them, he almost wished he hadn't. He was just one man living alone in the snow. He had no army, no allies, no reason to stand against something this big. And yet here she was, in his bed, her life tied to his by a storm and a single desperate plea. He looked at her, his voice rough. "You should have left me out of this. If they find you here, they'll kill me too. My life will mean nothing." Her eyes softened, her voice breaking. "No, your life means more than you know. You are human. You are free, and you chose to open your door." Her words hit him harder than the cold. He remembered the knock, the desperate voice in the storm, the sight of her collapsing on his floor. He could have left her outside. He could have turned away, but he hadn't. And now his choice had changed everything. The fire sputtered, almost dying. He threw another log in, sparks rising like tiny stars. When he turned back, Lyra was staring at the door, her eyes wide. She whispered, "They're closer." He froze. His ears caught it too, a faint hum under the storm, machines moving through snow. Lights flickered through the frosted window. The hunters were back. Lyra clutched the crystal tight against her chest, her voice fierce but trembling. "If they break in, they will not just kill us, they will take this, and all hope will vanish," the man's heart thundered. He looked at her, at the crystal, at the fire. He had lived in silence and loneliness, thinking his life no longer mattered. But tonight one choice might decide more than his own survival. The hunters' shadows grew larger against the cabin walls. Their boots crunched closer. The man gripped his shovel, every muscle tense. Lyra's voice came like a final breath of truth. "Choose, human. Will you stand with me or let the galaxy burn in silence?" The storm outside had grown quieter, but the silence was worse than the howling wind. It was the kind of silence that came when hunters moved closer, when death itself waited just beyond the door. The man stood near the fire, shovel gripped tightly in his hands. His breath steamed in the cold air, each exhale louder than he wanted it to be. Lyra sat on the bed, clutching the glowing crystal to her chest, her silver eyes locked on him. "Choose," she whispered again. Her voice shook, but not from cold this time. From fear, from urgency. The man swallowed hard. He was only human, a lonely soul hidden away in the snow, living each day with nothing but silence and fire. He was no soldier. He was no hero. And yet somehow tonight the galaxy had been placed in his hands. His thoughts screamed at him. "If I throw her out, they might spare me. If I hide her, they will kill me. Why should I die for someone I don't even know?" But then another voice whispered inside him. "You opened the door. You let her in. You made her your burden the moment you chose mercy." Lyra's eyes glistened in the firelight. "I cannot beg anymore," she said softly. "I am too tired. But if you give me to them, you must live knowing you killed more than me. You killed hope." The words cut deep. He turned away, staring at the window. Shadows moved outside, slow and steady. He could hear muffled voices, alien commands. The hunters were surrounding the cabin. His heartbeat thundered. Sweat slid down his temple. He imagined opening the door, shoving her outside, letting the storm swallow her. He could survive. He could stay alone. He could tell himself it wasn't his fight. But when he glanced back, he saw her face. Exhausted, broken, yet still holding on to the crystal as if it was the last piece of light in a world of darkness. And something inside him refused to betray that. The floor creaked under his boots as he moved closer to her. She lifted her head, surprise flickering in her eyes. "I don't know why," he muttered, "but I can't hand you over." For the first time, her lips curved into something close to a real smile. "Then you have already chosen." Before he could speak again, the cabin shook. The door rattled violently. A voice shouted in that guttural alien tongue. The hunters had found them. The man raised his shovel, his hands trembling. He knew it was useless against alien weapons, but it was all he had. His heart pounded so loud he was sure they could hear it through the walls. Lyra stood slowly, still weak, but her eyes burned with sudden fire. She slipped the crystal into her clothes and turned to him. "If they enter, I will fight beside you," she said. "I will not let them take you without a struggle." The man blinked, shocked. "You can fight?" A faint, bitter laugh escaped her lips. "I have fought all my life. Even running is a kind of fight." The door rattled again, harder this time. Splinters cracked along the wooden frame. The storm outside had grown calm enough that the hunters were ready to break in. The man clenched his teeth. Fear clawed at his chest, but something else rose with it. Anger. Anger at being hunted in his own home. Anger at the thought of betraying someone who trusted him. Anger at the silence he had once called life. He took a step toward the door, shovel raised. If they want you, they'll have to go through me first. Lyra's eyes widened. For a moment she looked at him not as a stranger, but as something more. Her voice softened. Then tonight you are no longer lonely. Tonight you are a shield. The words filled him with a strange strength. The cabin shook again as a heavy blow slammed into the door. Dust fell from the ceiling. The man tightened his grip, his heart racing. He looked at Lyra. She looked back, her silver eyes fierce despite her weakness. And in that moment, he knew his choice was final. He would not betray her. He would not run. If this was his last night, he would face it standing. The fire roared, casting wild shadows across the room. The door cracked, a sharp beam of red light slicing through the gap. The hunters were coming in. The man planted his feet. Ready. Lyra whispered one last promise, her voice steady despite the storm and the danger. Whatever happens, human, they will remember you. The door exploded inward and the choice was sealed. The door burst open with a crash and the storm's icy air rushed inside. Snow swirled through the cabin as armored shadows filled the doorway. Their eyes glowed red through heavy masks and strange weapons hummed with deadly energy. The man tightened his grip on the shovel. His heart hammered in his chest, but his feet held firm. For the first time in years, he did not feel like a lonely ghost in the snow. He felt alive, burning with purpose. Beside him, Lyra rose from the bed. Her body was weak, her breath ragged, but her silver eyes blazed like fire against the storm. She clutched the crystal to her chest, whispering words in her alien tongue. Words the man could not understand, but words that carried power. The hunters stepped inside. The wooden floor groaned under their boots. One lifted his weapon, a glowing barrel aimed straight at the man's chest. The man raised the shovel. His voice broke the silence. You want her? You'll have to go through me first. The hunter tilted his head as if mocking the human's foolish courage. But before the weapon could fire, Lyra screamed a word in her language and flung her hand outward. Light burst from her palm, sharp and blinding. The cabin shook as energy cracked through the air, knocking the first soldier back into the snow. The man blinked, stunned. Lyra's body trembled from the effort, but her eyes burned with fury. I told you, she gasped. I have fought before. The remaining hunters roared, stepping forward with weapons ready. The man swung his shovel with desperate strength, striking one across the mask. Sparks flew as the blow landed, though the weapon bent in his hands. Pain shot up his arm, but he didn't stop. The fight was chaos. Blasts of red light burned holes into the wooden walls. Snow sprayed through shattered windows. The fire scattered sparks across the floor. The man ducked, swung, shoved, fought with every ounce of his body, even as fear gnawed at his bones. Lyra stood behind him, summoning bursts of energy from the crystal. Each flash was weaker than the last, draining her, but enough to push the hunters back for precious seconds. Finally, the last soldier raised his weapon, charging it for a final shot. The man stumbled, shovel broken in two, chest heaving. He knew he could not stop this one, but Lyra stepped forward, pushing him aside. Her voice rang clear, sharp as a blade. You will not take him. You will not take this. She lifted the crystal high. It pulsed brighter and brighter until the entire cabin blazed with white light. The man shielded his eyes, but in that instant he felt warmth flood through him. Not just heat, but something deeper, strength, courage, a bond. Then came silence. When he opened his eyes, the hunters were gone. Only melted snow marked their footprints. The weapons, the shadows, the glowing red eyes vanished into the storm. Lyra collapsed, falling to her knees, the crystal dim in her hand. The man rushed forward, catching her before she hit the floor. Her body was ice cold, her breath weak, but her lips curved into a faint smile. You chose right, she whispered. He held her close, the fire dying behind them, the storm slowly calming outside. Don't talk. Save your strength, but she shook her head. No, listen, the dawn will come. They will return. You must be ready. He looked at her, at the fragile being who had knocked on his door as a stranger but now felt like something far more. His voice was raw. Why me? Why trust me? Her silver eyes flickered, weak but still burning. Because when I asked for warmth, you gave it. And that makes you stronger than all of them. The man felt his chest tighten. Loneliness had haunted him for years, but now holding her in his arms, he realized he was no longer alone. The storm outside faded. The first pale light of dawn broke over the snowy horizon, spilling through the broken door. The world was no longer silent, it was waiting. He looked at the rising sun and then at the woman in his arms. His voice was steady. "Then I'll be ready." Lyra closed her eyes, whispering one last word. "Human." The cabin lay in ruins, the fire burned low, and the snow still fell. But inside, something new had been born. Not just survival. Not just warmth, but a bond, a choice, a beginning. And as the breaking dawn lit the frozen world, the lonely human knew this night would be remembered. Not as the night he feared death, but the night he found a reason to live.